Hello everyone, welcome to Fortes and Fide. I'm your host Taylor Kelly. In this video today, we're going to talk about adding an examination of virtue to your examination of conscience. Okay? Now if you guys are new to the channel, welcome. If you like any of the content I make, I'm going to be updating more frequently. Actually going to have a schedule. I know I've been posting kind of sporadically, but I'm going to be uploading new videos every Friday. So if you guys are interested in content like this, just be sure to like and subscribe and look forward to a new video every Friday. I'll usually post around in the afternoon in the CST time zone. So hope you guys look forward to that. Now today we're going to talk about virtue. Now, most of us are familiar with an examination of conscience, right? You know, you go at the end of the day, you think about the blessings God has given you. You think about all the sins that you've committed, right? And you do that just to kind of reflect and kind of close off the day. And it's a really good practice. It's a very healthy spiritual practice because being aware of your sins and being aware of the blessings is one of the things that's going to help you grow in virtue. Now, a problem you might run into, and this is a problem I run into, is sometimes I can't remember every sin I've committed, right? And you don't want to be in a position where you are making up sins, right? That's actually bad. That's very scrupulous. So you don't want to be in a position where you think so poorly of yourself, you think you're so bad that like there has to be something wrong with me. There has to be like a sin I've committed. When in fact is that, here's the analogy I use, right? Let's say you hold the door open for somebody, right? You hold the door open and they walk through. What is the normal thing, at least for Americans, right? So I don't know about this in other cultures, but let's say you open the door for someone. What's the typical response you expect to hear? Thank you, right? You expect to hear thank you. Now, sometimes people don't thank you, right? They don't say thank you. Now, does it offend you? It could, right? Sometimes I get a little bit offended if I hold the door open or I help someone out and they don't say thank you, right? And that's an attachment you got to get rid of. And that's an attachment I have to get rid of too, is trying to do something expecting something in return, right? Regardless though, you and I can both recognize that, hey, if someone does something nice, you should probably thank them. You should probably say something to them, right? And this is kind of like our relationship with God. There are things that we do that we don't even realize are offensive to God. We don't even know it, right? And one of the things that you need to do when you pray is you have to ask the Holy Spirit to open your mind and open your heart to all the ways you've offended God, even in ways that you may think aren't, right? Now again, you don't want to create problems that don't exist. But an exercise that I like to use is after I do my regular examination of conscience, I go over all the 7 deadly sins, and a good way to remember the 7 deadly sins is a phrase called pale gas. Pale gas, P stands for pride, A is avarice, L is lust, E is envy, G is gluttony, A is anger, and S is sloth, right? So you think about all the times you were perhaps committing those sins that are related to that. And then afterwards, think about the counter virtues. And think about ways and opportunities in which you could have grown in that virtue. Because that's honestly how you grow. When you are presented with opportunities to become, for example, more humble, that's going to combat the sin of pride, right? And it's going to help you recognize it. So for example, when you're making your examination of virtues, ask yourself this question: were there opportunities throughout your day in which you could have shown humility, which you could have been humble, right? And this is a really great way to kind of think back at your day in a different way, because we can always think of we can always think in extremes sometimes, right? We think, okay, when we think of the word pride, we probably picture like a person who's really boastful, maybe, they're showing off, and, a lot of us, we probably don't necessarily commit sins in that regard, but we do commit small sins of pride every once in a while, or we miss opportunities in which we become more humble, right? So here's a really easy example. If somebody does something or says something to you that is like a compliment, right? Maybe someone congratulates you on a job promotion. Maybe someone congratulates you on a work that you're doing. A really good way to show humility and become humble is thank the person, obviously, but then also tell them, praise be to God, right? When you say praise be to God or thank God, right? Like somebody said, like, hey, congratulations on the job promotion. I'm like, yeah, praise be to the Lord, I got that promotion, right? That's like a little small way as a Christian that, first of all, you're you're evangelizing in a way, right? Because you're making this person realize, oh wow, this person is giving praise to God, not himself, right? And we live in a culture where it's all about me, right? It's like me, 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 me. If you turn the attention to God, that's a way to grow in virtue. And that's going to combat pride, because Satan hates humility. This is why he hates Our Lady so much, because she was humble. She submitted herself to the Lord, right? Same thing with Christ, and same thing with many of the saints, right? They submitted themselves to God's will, and they gave God all the credit. So that's one way. When it comes to the sin of avarice, right? Again, a lot of us think of like Scrooge McDuck, right? Scrooge McDuck, where you just have all these hoards of money, and you're just like, no, mine, right? Or you think of these, what's that show? Like the Hoarder show. I can't remember what it's called, but like people are just hoarding stuff. You probably think of that extreme. But then think of it this way: when were there opportunities in your day to be more generous? It doesn't necessarily have to be money, right? When were the opportunities in your day when you could have decided to be more generous with your time, right? More generous with your effort, right? Because a lot of us, you might have run into the situation, or maybe you're talking with a friend, maybe they're going through something difficult, and you have some things that you're just like, you just don't want to deal with it, so you just try to end the conversation early, right? Maybe you'd rather do something else more fun, right? Perhaps you are coming home from work and you're really tired, and maybe your wife maybe your wife's really tired and she's also had a long day. And as a man, you decide, I'm going to take care of the kids. I'm going to brush their teeth. I'm going to give them a bath. I'm going to let my wife rest, even though I had a full day at work, right? And those opportunities are growing virtue. And I'm not saying necessarily if you choose to not do those things, they're sins, right? But you're also missing an opportunity for God's grace to open you up to growing in virtue, which is something he wants us to have more of, right? And then we go to lust. Now this one's pretty self-explanatory, right? Like if you're looking at immodest pictures or looking at someone in a overtly sexual way, then yeah, that's obviously bad. But also another way to think of it is that when were there opportunities in which I could have been more pure in my speech, more pure, more chaste? Were there times when I would see things that I know are sinful and pray for that person instead of looking at them as an object, right? And this is something that's really common, right? Like we live in a culture where, especially in the summertime, where immodesty is just, but most people don't even realize how immodest they're dressing, right? And as a man, sometimes you'll look at that and then you'll kind of you'll want to avert your eyes. And at the same time, as you do that, you should also be praying for that person, right? Pray for that person to kind of open their heart and realize, like, look what you're doing, right? And not to say that you're self-righteous, not that you're casting judgment, but you also have to recognize that this is a person created in the image and likeness of God, and you have to also pray that they're gonna change their heart to only reserving those parts of their body for married life, right? And that's kind of like a touchy, kind of hard topic, especially it's very taboo today because people want to make, they want to make sex like the pinnacle of life when it's really not. We're called to something far greater than that. We're called to something that surpasses just the act of conjugal love. I think that's a big problem that society's pushing on us, especially with all this gender ideology stuff. Like they're making that like that's our identity. Like that's the only thing that matters is, are you this orientation? When really it's not that important. Like it's not the most important thing in the world. The most important thing in the world is that we're children of God. That's the only identity that matters. Is that we're created by God, for God, out of love. Only thing that matters. And so we went over pride, avarice, lust, and then now we have gluttony. Okay, gluttony. When were there opportunities in which you picked foods, right? Now, a lot of people, again, we get this idea in our head that gluttony is like, okay, this is the person who just overindulges in food and just kind of, and I think for Americans, like for us, we live in a place that's very abundant. We have an abundance of a lot of stuff, right? And because we have so much abundance, I think it's very foreign to us to to understand what gluttony is, right? So gluttony, if you're having a hard time with gluttony or not really seeing opportunities where you're gluttonous, think about when you're enjoying food. Are you enjoying it for the sake of nourishment? Are you enjoying it for the sake of, getting yourself more healthy, more strong, or are you eating it just because, right? Now, again, God created good food. He created, he helped man invent chocolate and sweets and good stuff, right? And there's a time and place for that. Even in Jesus' own life, he did celebrate with his apostles. He went to the wedding feast at Cana. You don't think they had good desserts at the wedding feast at Cana? I'm sure they did, and I'm sure he participated in that. But there's a time and place, right? There's a time and place. There's a time for fasting. There's a time for feasting, right? And this is why, it's really good if you follow the church calendar, because it kind of gives you moderation. Like, you can base basically your food intake based on the feasts, right? So you can look at a feast day and be like, okay, today's the day where I can probably enjoy something a little bit, or today's like an abstinence day, right? Well, okay, I'm probably going to cut back on that. And remember, God, he created us. He knows all about us. He knows how our body works. He knows that human beings desire good things, right? We desire things that are good, right? That taste good, right? But he also wants us to experience moderation. This is the same kind of similarities between this and sex, right? Because sex is an act to procreate. It's not a bad act. It's not an evil act. But if it's twisted, if it's used as purely something to just get enjoyment from, then it becomes a problem. This is why if you have a really good confessor, they're probably going to have, especially if you've been committing sins of lust, they're probably going to have you actually fast, right? And some people think like, well, how is that related? It is, because overeating and over-engaging in sexual acts, they're related because they both kind of go over the same thing, right? Overindulging in something that's good. Sex isn't bad. It's good within marriage and for procreation. Gluttony, food is not bad so long as that's used for nourishment and it's used at the proper time, right? So that's gluttony. Now, when we go to anger, this one, think about all the times where you might have blown up, right? Where you might have lashed out and not controlled your emotions. If you feel emotions building up in you and you don't act upon it, you're fine. But if you act upon it, right? Like you yell at your wife, or you yell at your husband, or you yell at a friend, or yell at somebody, or get upset with your dog even, right? A creature, like, you got to think like, okay, was I controlling my emotions? Because every time we're tempted, this is like an opportunity in which we can essentially slap Satan in the face and be like, nope, I'm going to choose God instead, right? When you do it like that, and when you look at these temptations, not as curses and not as anything bad, but as opportunities for God to help you grow in virtue, this is kind of like strength training, right? When you lift weights, you get stronger, but in the moment, it is tough, right? It's difficult, and that's the same way temptation works. And then finally, sloth, right? Now, this is in regards to the spiritual things. So think about all the times in which you kind of got lazy to pray, right? Maybe you drove by a grave, and in your heart you were told, okay, maybe I should say a Hail Mary for all the souls in purgatory. And then you're like, nah, I don't feel like it. Okay, that's an opportunity to grow in grace, right? Whenever you feel a prompting from the Holy Spirit to pray for a particular person or pray for something that's needed, right? Then that is something that's going to help you grow. And again, you might have to do this exercise several times, like several weeks in a row, and then it's going to help you. Then you're going to see like, okay, this is where I missed opportunities to grow in virtue, right? These are opportunities that I could have used to, become a saint, because that's what we're all called to be. We're all called to be saints, and every saint at one point was a sinner, and the more effort you put in, okay, God's going to abundantly give you back, right? I kid you not, you guys. Like, if you give God effort, even if you give him a little bit, he's going to maximize it. And a reflection I got just the other day, because I was kind of going through these like almost like despairing thoughts, where I was thinking like, man, there's so many things to pray for, so many people to pray for, so many things I have to do in order to become better. And then I just kind of heard this, almost like this feeling in my heart, which was, remember what Jesus did with the loaves and the two fish, right? And what did the apostles say? What are these among so many? You give God your 5 loaves and your 2 fish, which is essentially all you have, right? And he's going to multiply it. He's going to transform it in ways which you could possibly not imagine, right? Think of the Eucharist, right? What does God do in the Eucharist? Well, he takes ordinary bread and wine and transforms it into his body and blood while maintaining the appearances of bread and wine. Now, he can do the same thing for your soul. If he can do that to these ordinary things, he can do that to your soul. And even better, he can do that to your soul even with just a little bit of effort. You give him a little bit of effort, he's going to take that and he's going to help you grow, right? You give him something, he'll give you, tenfold back, right? Think of the parable of the talents, right? It's repeated in the gospel over and over. God just wants our faith. If we give him our trust and we give him our will and we tell him we love him, he's going to help us out, right? And that's just the message I want to share today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you guys want to see future videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the bell so you don't miss out on new videos. I'll see you all next time. God bless.